I'm back today with Carlos Orantes, the CEO of Alcanza Research, who I absolutely adore. I did not say that on the first video because I feel like I say it often, but the fact is, and people know this, I love the people in our industry. I think there are really great people, and he is just top of the heap, fantastic, intelligent, thoughtful, a leader through and through. I just adore Carlos. So we're talking today about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I just want to leave you with this question because people hear this and sometimes there's this thought that like we know what it really means, and I think there's too narrow of a view about it. Carlos has a very broad view of it, as do I. Thinking about, can we accept that what we don't know? We think we know our area that our sites are in or that a site is in. We think we know our population. We think we know how to behave with people. But he has some wonderful practical tips about how to improve inclusion throughout our research. And I think it's beautiful. So enjoy. So, you're a popular speaker at industry conferences on so many topics, one of them being diversity, equity, and inclusion. What's the core message you want companies to hear?
This is something where when I hear that the acronym DEI or the three words diversity, equity, inclusion, it means a little bit different to every single person you talk to. And number one, this isn't a thing or it's not a flavor of the month. This is a real problem and an opportunity that we have, right? We literally do not have adequate representation in clinical research that is representative or demonstrative of the demographics of communities around our research sites. That's number one. Number two, we also have probably not adequate representation at the research site team members to reflect what the demographics of those communities are. So it's a problem and an opportunity. I say a problem more for clinical research because of the reasons the FDA is wanting us to drive more diverse patient populations into the research participation. But what I want people to understand is we all have different opportunities on how to move the needle. And it's going to take everybody to work together. It's the research sites, the sponsors, the CROs, and most important, the FDA, right? I think the FDA has done a much better job over the past, several quarters to give more refined guidance. But ultimately, we all know it's going to end up in a very prescribed goal and objective for the research studies. And we've got to get there, I think, a little sooner than we have, because everybody's doing different things to get to a goal that we don't really know what it is. It's a little gray and it hasn't been fully defined. And ultimately, it's going to be whatever the protocol says. That's the goal for the study. But I think there are things we can do as an industry and individual companies in advance of that to start making sure that, number one, we're aware. Awareness of what communities exist around your sites is probably the number one opportunity to see what it has in demographics and what we are used to seeing at the sites, right? That's the gap. That's the opportunity. The same thing with our team members. What is a composite of our team members? I know that is something that people say patients want to look for people that look like them when they come to the research. But it's not just look like them, it's also understand who they are, what culture you bring to the table, so that when you come to the research sites, both sides feel comfortable. The patient or participant wants to feel safe and comfortable, that they'll be understood, not misunderstood. And I think also our team members, we want them to feel comfortable, that they know about all these cultures, the ethnicities, it's not just race and ethnicity, right? The definition of diverse is broader than that. Sexual orientation, age, gender, working status, disability status. So I think we need to take a step back and first decide and confirm, what is it that this means to us today? And then just start moving the needle. Don't try to do everything, because you will not be able to. Focus on a couple things to just start moving the needle. And make sure you're doing things internally within your staff, for example, and things that are outward to the populations that we're trying to engage. So I know that was a mouthful, but there's a lot of opportunity here. And that's why that little acronym DEI is both scary and exciting at the same time.
An extremely thought-provoking answer, because one of the things I've said for years is that your site, the staff added, should reflect the demographics however they are. And you're right, it includes many things more than just race and ethnicity, but that it appreciates and reflects the community. And from there, you can usually set up that you are then bringing in patients who reflect the community as well. And you have sites all over the place. You know that each site is not going to have the same community base. But I think what you said that I've never thought of before is that there are the subtle ways that it makes a difference that we have that. Like, are we really hearing a person? Like, I can talk to someone, but do I understand their culture? But if I work with someone who is of a certain culture, then I understand my patient from that culture better. That I've never really thought about.
I think the other thing that's very important, sometimes people think they know what is the demographic around their site because they're basing that on what they've seen. I'll give you an example where there is a site that we have that was in business for well over 20, 25 years. And the demographic of the participants reflected part of the demographic around the site. But when you start looking with actual data, we found, as an example, one town not that far away, 85% Latino. In the other direction, another town, 76% Asian. Why aren't they reflected in the site demographics? Well, that's because there was somewhat of a lack of awareness of those demographics existing, and also how to engage and reach out to them. So it works both ways, right? First, you need to understand what you have, and doing so with data is much better.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. And also, I think that we make a mistake as well on some of the intake forms where you talked about a patient not feeling comfortable and they might not like the way questions are asked. I mean, there's so much that goes into a patient feeling comfortable. They have to like the people who greet them. The paperwork tells them something about how the clinic feels about them. There's just so much there. And so, to your point about starting small, like figure out one place you're going to make an effort. You could do something as small as looking at your intake forms, and you could do something else about looking for a new way to advertise for jobs at the site, right? I don't know if you think of any others, because I do see a lot of opportunity for just little incremental changes that would meet the 80-20 rule.
Sure. Well, I think the other thing that comes to mind, let's see, some cultural things. It's not unusual to see some complex therapeutic areas have a participant and their caretaker come. But you probably don't expect that in all studies. So when they show up, we need to be open and understand, okay, in that culture perhaps, or even a preference that might be an offset of a culture, they want to bring a trusted family member or friend or neighbor to just validate. So we need to be prepared that if so-and-so brings not a caretaker, but sort of somebody to validate, we need to be comfortable and be open to that, as opposed to saying, thank you for coming, you wait in the waiting room, and then you, Mr. or Mrs. Participant, you get to come back to the exam room with me, but you can't bring that person. Imagine that. They bring that security blanket, and then we take it away from them. So we just need to be aware of that. And that takes, it's a constant thing. So one of the things that we do is monthly, we have an all hands call where everybody from the company gets together. So we even touch on DEI topics, initiatives that we have, awareness on what this celebration really means, where it originated, awareness for different cultures, and even religion. It's important to even take that into consideration, not only when you're calling people. Again, if you're calling people and you're not aware of holidays or asking them to come in, holidays as well. So religion does even have a way to play into this, even though people say religion is irrelevant. It might be irrelevant biologically, perhaps, but it's absolutely everything is relevant because it's in the environment of these participants, and we have to be open and aware.
Absolutely. I don't think I would have thought about the scheduling aspect. Just the thing of putting into your Outlook calendar where you can choose different calendars to go in there, you'd be able to call differently. That is one of those easy things you talked about that would not be that big of a deal. Not that you know someone's religion necessarily when you call them, but kind of just being aware of it. And I saw something from a different society. It was from a different country, but it was like how to be aware of talking to a certain group. And it is often the men in the culture who will make the decision. So it would even be like if a woman is going into a clinical trial, it would be a man in her life who is going to make the decision. And you can imagine that if they come into, I mean, I'm from Los Angeles. They come in, and I'm a 20-year-old, strong, independent, female with my own culture, and I'm like, what? I mean, there could be, and I wouldn't do that now, but what I have in my 20s, I think it's very reasonable that we have to train people that it's a completely different culture and they're all equal, all
Absolutely.
equal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they have their own way of doing things. And so that's where awareness, you don't have to fully understand it or fully accept it. You just need to be aware so that you're not caught off guard and you can comfortably navigate through that process, because if you're not comfortable, they'll see that. And then I think they extrapolate that lack of comfort they see in you with the situation to, is this really a good company that will take me into the research? I'm going to give them myself and they're going to walk me through this research study, but I'm not sure that they can because I don't see the comfort. And so everything can fall apart in every moment of truth that we have with interactions with potential participants. So, and the same goes for employees, right? So you mentioned earlier the concept of how do you staff more closely representative of the demographics? Well, it does start with how do you advertise positions, for example. So we switched to an applicant tracking system that actually has a very high selection of job boards that do, that are very highly frequented by diverse groups. And when I say diverse, it's pretty broad, like I defined it earlier. But I think the other thing too, it also blinds resumes up front. So when people are looking at the resumes, you take out some of the bias. You don't know if it's male or female based on the name. You don't know where they live and things like that. So that way, hiring managers can actually look at the experience, for example, without focusing on some of the inherent biases that might exist out there, even though we'll all say they don't exist. They do, right? And so these are things you can do little bits at a time to actually move the needle with, okay, let's get that inherent bias out so we can get the candidates in and give them a chance so that they don't get ruled out early on in the process for little silly things that, just we don't even know influence us, but they do.
You're such a tremendous leader. I love talking with you every time. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask the question I'm asking everyone is this: what is exciting or amazing about working in clinical research?
So this is something that, funny story. Just the other morning last week, a young lady at the gym who checked me in asked me, do you have a job? And it was kind of a funny way of asking, what do you do for a living, right? And I said, actually, I don't have a job. And she said, oh, I am so sorry to hear that. I said, no, 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 no. Let me explain. I don't have a job because I wake up every day and I just love what we do. I love what I do. So I don't see it as a job. And she goes, wow, why do you feel that way? I said, because there are few industries that can get up every day and say that what we do will absolutely matter to people. And being so close now to these drugs that we make sure are safe and efficacious, make it to the market, you see it, you see the impact. And when you add all these elements that make our job even harder, dealing with people on all the stakeholders that we deal, whether it's our employees, investigators, patients, partners that we deal with, or all the regulatory guidelines. And now on top of it all, let's throw in diversity, right, to make it even more fun. It's so challenging that there's never a dull moment. You wake up every day and you truly don't know what you're going to get. So to me, I thrive in this environment. And so that's why I say I don't have a job. Every day is getting up and just saying, well, how can I move the needle today? Not only for my investors, my team members. I don't lose sight that our organization supports the livelihood of so many employees. And also that we have commitments to our sponsors and CROs. And there's a lot depending on that. And then last but not least, our participants, right? So there's a lot that's on our plate, but think about how much of an impact we can make each and every single day. So that's why I say that this is not a job. It's a passion and it's an adventure, because if it were a job, I mean, you know how many hours we put into these roles, and there's a lot to do. So yeah, I can't say enough of why I love this industry, especially in the spot where I'm at today versus much earlier in the drug development pathway.
Awesome. We need to have you as our poster child, because that was one of the more impassioned answers I've ever heard. And I love the industry too. And this is why Susan Landis and I were talking about, people fall into it, and the ones who catch the bug, they stay with it forever. People don't really leave clinical research because it is so rewarding. And we don't talk about that. We're talking right now, and this is the focus of my interview series, is about people, trying to draw people in. But yeah, we have amazing retention, I think, in the field.
We do.
Thank you.
And I think that's one of the things that I love most about this part of the field in the late phase is a collaboration. Those that have been here in the industry, when I got into the clinical part of the industry, I remember there were several mentors that I met. And as soon as I met them, I'm like, these people know a lot. I'm going to plug into them and learn. And they're open to help you and talk to you and walk you through, shepherd you into. Remember, we talked about training investigators, training CRCs. Well, we also as leaders need people to help us get into the industry to make our impact. And there's a lot of willingness to be collaborative. You don't have that in all parts of drug development.
So, thank you so much, Carlos.
Welcome.